In this video, we'll be mainly discussing about how to implement a web application with JAAS authentication. The video will be divided into several parts to get you to understand the concept in more details. Let's create a new Glassfish server to be dedicated for our JAAS project. But before that, I'd like to show you how you can create a new domain for the new server. Since for Glassfish, we have to maintain the relationship between the server and domain as one-to-one. So go to the bin directory under the Glassfish resource and run this as the admin script, which will give us access to the administrative tasks. Then type the command create domain admin port 6868 demo domain. So before we hit enter to run this command, I'd like to explain a bit about this line. So basically, create domain is the keyword for creating a new domain on the server. We will set the port number after the admin port keyword. Make sure this port is not occupied by other domains. I will show you lately for how you can check and change the port number. The last part is just for the domain name. So you can always use your own name. Here I just name it as demo domain for the demo purpose. So after this, the terminal will ask us about the admin username and password. Let's just keep it simple to leave it as empty and hit enter to continue. So once the Glassfish manages to create our new domain, it will display the message saying create domain executed successfully. And yeah, so if we go back to our Glassfish source directory and check this domains folder, and under that we have this new folder created, which is named with demo domain name. Now, before we bring up the server, there is one more thing to do, which is check the root port for HTTP listeners in our domain. The reason for doing this is, let's say in one scenario where you want to have two servers running at the same times or multiple servers, if they are sharing the same port for the HTTP listeners, you won't be able to run them together. So in order to check the port, we need to open the domain.xml file under each domains folder. You can find them under the config directory and modify the port number inside. Let's check our default domain, which is the domain 1 first. Here as you can see, the HTTP listener port number for domain 1 is 8080 and 8181. And the admin port is 4848. So if you remember, we just set the admin port number for our new domain to pointing to 6868. So that's how we resolve this port collusion issue. So we will do the same check for all the domains that we have. Here, this is another domains details. And let's go to our new domains XML file. Here we can tell that both HTTP listeners are pointing to the port, which are not in use by other domains. So by doing this, we can confirm that there won't be any port collusion issues when we run the server. Let's go back to Eclipse to quickly create a server to map it with our new domain. For creating database, I won't show you step by step for this since we've already discussed in the previous video. So if you want to review them, feel free to click on the link on the top right corner. However, I'd like to give you a quick explanation on the queries in the scrapbook. Basically, we need to create two tables, which are users and user groups. So users will contain the ID, username, and password, while for user groups, it is the table for identifying different users with different roles. So below we are having some insert queries. Here, because we will be using SHA-256 as our encryption method, we will simply insert the password that has already been encrypted. So there are plenty of online tools that can generate the encrypted value based on the input text for you. So here, to keep things simple, the passwords are all the same as the username, but you can understand them in the data. You can't understand them in the database since they have been encrypted. And for the groups, we will be having two groups, which are teachers and students. So go to the main console. On the top left corner, you can tell that the server is running with our newly created domain. And you will need to create a new JDBC connection pool and resource first to map them with your database. I will just quickly do it instead of explaining them in this video. Again, feel free to click on the top right panel to go to previous video for this part. So the main thing here is to add a new security realm. So expand the server config under the configurations category, and then go to the security realm and create a realm. Here I like to highlight a couple of key points here. The first one is the name of the realm. Make sure you remember this one because later on we will need it in our web XML file. And the JAAS context has to be JDBC realm, since it identifies the context of the class. JNDI should be pointed to the corresponding JDBC resource. To the end, we will declare the SHA-256 as our encryption method. Go back to Eclipse. I will quickly create a new dynamic web project and make sure you select the JSF 2.2 for the configuration. Let's first copy the code and page structure into our project from the example project, and then I will explain them in details. So as you can see, we have a folder structure in our web content directory, which is a bit different from what we have in previous weeks. So the three folders, public, students, and teachers, will be the areas that have certain privileges, which means the user has to meet a certain authentication requirement before they go into these areas. I'll quickly show you the content inside these regarding these three areas. Apart from these three folders, we also have some common pages outside. 403 page will be loaded when the browser gets a 403 error, which means when the user goes to a page that doesn't allow him or her to access, they will be redirected to this 403 page. Move on to the error page. It is kind of doing the similar thing, but the user will be navigated to this page when they fail passing the authentication, like inputting a wrong password or username. The index page is for user to choose different rows and areas to access. Finally, the login page is the place where we use the form-based authentication. The form will be submitted by using the post method, and inside we have JUsername and JPassword. These are the input IDs for the form-based authentication. Open the web.xml file. In default, it should show us with a tree view of the file. Basically, this file is the configuration file that could enable the application to work with JAAS on the server. We need to create several properties to make it work. First, we need to declare the project stage is development in the context parameter. Then we need to define the error page to map with our 403 page. The location would be the servlet location. Then we need to add different security constraints for different rows, or you can say user groups. Let's create a student 1 as an example. We will name it as student access. Then we need to add web resource collection. We will name it protected student area. Inside this collection, we need to declare the URL pattern to be mapped with this area, which basically relates to our folder structure. Also define all the HTTP methods which are allowed for this area to be used. Here we will simply select all of them. Lastly, we need to add authentication constraint to map with the role name declared in the database. So we will do the same thing for teacher access as well. We notice that here we also create a public area to allow all access. The only difference between public area and restrict area is we don't need to declare the auth constraint for public one. Finally, in the login config category, we need to change the authentication method to form, since we are using the JSecurity check, which is basically a form-based login. The realm name is the name that we created on the Glassfish server previously, and map the login page and the error page to the corresponding servlet URL. Let's do a quick demo here. Initially, as an anonymous user, we can access the public area directly without login. And then if we want to access the teacher area, the system requests us to log in. If we import a wrong password, it will redirect us to an error page. Now, if we try to log in with the correct credentials, we can access to the index page of the teacher's area. But while we are logging as a teacher, we cannot access to the student's area. So that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.